Every town has its urban legends, those modern myths which once proliferated by way of playgrounds and backyard campfires, and now circulate via smartphones and social media. Many of these, like the legend of Cropsey, the boogeyman of Staten Island, are based on solid but only partially understood historical fact. They're more lurid details, perhaps deriving from an attempt to fill the blank spaces in the public narrative. Others, like the creepypasta character Slender Man, which slithered from its cyberspace breeding ground into modern folklore, have no discernible connections to reality, apparently being nothing more than the products of imagination and credulity. What distinguishes urban legends from proper ghost stories, monster sightings, and other accounts of the weird and the wonderful are their complete reliance on unverifiable third-hand hearsay, their quintessential derivation from the account of some nameless friend of a friend. Unlike most tales of the unexplained, which even the most hardened skeptic would be forced to admit have undeniable roots in the historical record, urban legends are essentially fictional, partly fictional, or unverifiable stories masquerading as fact. In this piece, we will explore 5 urban legends unique to the Great White North. Enjoy. Beneath the Canadian National Railroad, on the northern outskirts of Niagara Falls, Ontario, in the very center of the quiet rural strip separating that city from northwesterly St. Catharines, runs a small limestone corridor known as the Screaming Tunnel. Built in the early 1900s for drainage purposes, this dark, 125-foot-long passageway, hidden away off Warner Road, not far from the Queen Elizabeth Highway and the Warner Methodist Cemetery beyond, its entrance shaded by overhanging vegetation, is the perfect setting for one of Canada's eeriest urban legends. According to local lore, the tunnel owes its name to a tragic event which took place around the turn of the 20th century. One night, a nearby farmhouse caught fire, and a woman or girl stumbled from the inferno, suffering from appalling burns. Her nightgown ablaze, the girl staggered into the tunnel, wailing as she walked, perhaps hoping to find help on the other side of the railroad. Before she could complete her journey, she collapsed and died in the middle of that rough-hewn underpass. Ever since, disembodied shrieks, as of a woman in agony, have been heard emanating from the tunnel at night. Legend has it that if you enter the Screaming Tunnel at midnight and light a wooden match, something will blow your match out, and a blood-curdling scream will reverberate throughout the passageway. According to an article on the website ghostwalks.com, the cyber home of a ghost tour company, which brings its patrons to the most haunted locales in southern Ontario, there is a much less horrific story, which purports to explain the tunnel's naming. The article cites an anonymous Niagara historian who interviewed a nameless woman who claimed to have lived in the area at the time the tunnel was named. Years ago, the informant had an eccentric neighbor who argued frequently and loudly with her husband. Without fail, after each quarrel, this cantankerous housewife would exit her home, walk across a field, and disappear into the Screaming Tunnel. A couple seconds later, the informant told the historian, we all heard it, a loud scream. The first time it happened, we were scared. After a while, it felt normal, expected. She, and I swear this, walked to the middle of the tunnel and screamed at the top of her lungs. The birds never got used to it. We started calling it the Screaming Tunnel. Whatever secrets it holds, that gloomy corridor on the southern arm of Ontario's so-called Golden Horseshoe has an intrinsic spookiness, which will doubtless ensure its place in urban legend for years to come. Since the early 2000s, a disturbing story about a little-known historical event has circulated throughout the shadowy corners of the internet. The tale is set in Fort Kent, a remote hunting and fishing destination in east-central Alberta, not far from the Saskatchewan border, which lies at the junction of the Great Plains and the Boreal Forest. According to the story, back in the 1920s, when the town of Fort Kent was rapidly dwindling into the tiny hamlet it is today, its 19th century zenith as a vibrant logging community being little more than a fading memory. A mysterious predator took up residence in the nearby woods. Local ranchers would head to their stables in the morning to find their horses horrifically mutilated and their cattle disemboweled in the fields. At night, they heard unearthly howls emanating from the forest behind their properties. One brave soul who ventured out into the darkness, shotgun in hand, with the intention of killing this nocturnal marauder, reported seeing a dark shape with brilliantly glowing eyes flitting through the trees. Shortly after the appearance of this unwanted neighbor, the waning population of Fort Kent was bolstered by the arrival of 2 English immigrants, Dr. Thomas Burton and his wife Katie. Dr. Burton was a physician and combat surgeon who had served in the trenches in Flanders during the Great War. His senses reeling from the carnage he had witnessed in that muddy, rat-infested world,